he ends up having a very serious motorbike accident. And he ends up using his path and his journey with his teacher to recover from this injury and to really turn his life around in more ways than just the physical. So you can probably get a sense. I get goosebumps talking about it. So many years since I read this book, but you can get a sense of why perhaps this story was so relevant to me when I was so severely affected at the time with ME chronic fatigue. So welcome to this week's Spotlight Saturday. Spotlight Saturday is where I put a spotlight on some of the books, research papers, online courses, workshops that have either had a significant impact for me in my life or that I have seen have been really helpful for my patients and students and people that I've been supporting. For the first proper Spotlight Saturday, I slightly cheated last week and focused on my own vlog and podcast. I want to talk about the book that really started everything for me. It's a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's by Dan Millman. It's the first self-development book that I ever read. This was back in 1997 or 1998. And I was later to discover that my grandmother actually left it lying around for me in a few strategic places, hoping that I was going to read it. Didn't have the easiest relationship with my grandmother, but I do have to give her credit for the fact that she played a crucial role in kind of initiating my interest in self-development. And The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, it's a very readable book. It's a kind of part autobiographical, fictional sort of story. It's kind of partly based upon truth and I think partly elaborated as well. And it's about a gymnast, I guess it would have been back in the 60s or 70s, who meets this spiritual teacher that he calls Socrates. And he has this kind of weird initial moment with Socrates where he goes to this petrol station and Socrates is working behind the counter and he's kind of talking to him and then he's leaving and Socrates is standing on the roof. And as a gymnast and trampoline is Dan's kind of primary thing in gymnastics, he just can't understand how this old guy has got onto the roof of the petrol station. And that's kind of the initiation of his curiosity and his interest. And then Dan goes on a journey with Socrates and he, various things happen. But one of the things that happens is that he's training towards going to the Olympics. And this bit of the story is certainly based upon truth. And he ends up having a very serious motorbike accident. And he ends up using his path and his journey with his teacher to recover from this injury and to really turn his life around in more ways than just the physical. So you can probably get a sense. I get goosebumps talking about it. So many years since I read this book, but you can get a sense of why perhaps this story was so relevant to me when I was so severely affected at the time with ME chronic fatigue. Because there were a few key lessons in this book. One of which was the importance of commitment and responsibility. That at this moment, particularly when Dan has this motorbike accident and he really comes to realize, he's basically told he may never walk again by the doctors. And he realizes that if he wants to turn that around, he's going to have to be the one to turn it around. And it was one of the main inspirations and I guess planting of a seed that blossomed for me of this idea of taking radical action to change something that seems impossible. Another one of the lessons I got from this was the importance of surrendering to a teacher and to a path. And that teacher-student relationship is not always an easy relationship. My uncle was at the time a bit to me like Socrates is to Dan. He was not always there, or not always there when I wanted him to be there, but when he was there, he had a kind of tough love in a sense. There was compassion and care, but often it was wrapped up in some quite punchy and quite clear instructions. And the kind of lack of too much sympathy sometimes used to frustrate me. I remember my mother used to think he was quite harsh to me sometimes. But actually, I've come to realize in hindsight, it was so important in getting that discipline going in me and getting the kind of sense that I wasn't a victim. This was something that I could take responsibility for. And there's kind of different facets of this relationship with Dan and Socrates. But it's I have to say, I've had a number of mentors and teachers over the years. And it mirrors quite a few of those relationships of the kind of point of the at times idolization of a teacher, at times total frustration of a teacher, at times what seems like crazy wisdom, that they'll suggest something that seems completely counterintuitive and that kind of makes no sense, but actually it's the thing that we most need to be doing or acting upon. Another one of the things that I got from this book was the importance of humor. That and actually I did one of last week's episodes was about this, but the more seriously we take our problems, the more serious they become. And sometimes Socrates is just absolutely taking the mick out of Dan and laughing at him in ways that might seem quite unkind and cruel. But the intention is to bring a lightness and to realize that we can look at things differently. We can we can have a deeper insight by holding things more lightly. And the final thing I wanted to mention in terms of the lessons from the book, I mean, there's so many more, but just things to summarize, is also that this kind of self-development work is not easy. And there aren't quick fixes in the book. There are obviously moments of insight and breakthrough, but they're often hard fought and hard worked for. And actually the resolution of the book is in the kind of the ending of the story comes, I think, a decade later, where he's had various other experiences, partly which are written about some of the other books. Sacred Journey of the Peaceful Warrior is the sequel. It's good, but it's not, for me, not as impactful as the original book. But yeah, that the fruits of inner work, they come and they can be magical, and one's life can be full of deep gifts and blessings, but ultimately change is not easy. And I think sometimes I have an unpopular perspective in some of the self-development world, because a lot of teachers are on this kind of trip of you just have to change your thoughts and your whole life is going to change, and you need to just use positive affirmations and it'll all feel better. But when you're working in the trenches like I am with people that are dealing with very difficult, long-term, severe chronic illnesses, I am a deep, passionate believer in the potential of change. And, I'm radical on the other side in my sense that I believe that full recovery is possible for many people. But it's often not easy. And often that journey is challenging and difficult. And I really, at the time, I appreciated that about this book, because my own journey was very difficult at the time. And things that seemed too kind of glib and too kind of like, I read this quote and my whole life was fixed, just didn't really resonate for me. And I liked the struggle. And I liked the fact that Dan's commitment and investment in that struggle was part of the growth. It's like, muscles grow in a gym when we work them out, and we grow emotionally and spiritually when we are challenged and when we have to struggle. So there's a lot I can say about this book, and for me, I've absolutely lost count of how many books I've read. I think between my library at home and at the office, I think I probably have over 1,000 self-development books, and most of which I have read. It was a beginning of a big journey for me. But if you're looking for an easy read, a book that's got some powerful lessons, this is a great book for that. There's also a movie that was made about. It was certainly, I think, over 10 years ago, starring Nick Nolte. I was going to say that I would gift this book to one of you guys watching the vlog, and then I realized this is not my original copy, which I was going to gift. It's actually a copy that was gifted to my wife and I by my sister-in-law. And the message inside is, darling Tanya and Alex, I hope you enjoy this book as much as I did. Love, Violet. My sister-in-law, I don't think we'd met at this point. She didn't know it was the book that turned my life around. So it's kind of sweet, and I want to hang on to this copy because of that. So what I'm going to do is, if you're watching this on YouTube, I think we'll focus on YouTube and have lots of different comments, different places. Comment underneath this video about the book that's had the biggest impact on your life. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a self-development book, but it could be a novel. But what's the book that's had the biggest impact for you? Comment underneath, and I will send a copy of this book to randomly one of the people that comments below this video on YouTube. If you're UK based, I'll write in the book and I'll before I send it to you. If you're internationally based, it might be simpler if I order it directly from your country to save shipping book across the seas. But I will absolutely send a copy of Way of the Peaceful Warrior to anyone who comments. Not anyone. We would randomly choose someone who writes a comment underneath this on YouTube about the books had the biggest impact on you. And the audience this vlog on podcast is building, so there's not going to be hundreds of comments, so you've got a pretty good chance of getting me to send you a copy of the book. Tomorrow coming up is Soul Food Sunday, and we've got an excerpt from Nikki Foster's interview as part of the Fatigue Super Conference. And it's a piece where she's talking about how she knew that she was recovered from ME chronic fatigue because of being able to do certain activities. And we're going to get into that in tomorrow's episode. Thanks for watching.